So, what if an AI could actually teach itself? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating concept that could completely change how AI evolves. It's called self-adapting language models, or SEAL for short. And this isn't just about an AI that knows a lot of stuff, but one that actually knows how to learn.
Think about it this way. Right now, our large language models are incredible, but they're also kind of static. They're like a brilliant encyclopedia that was printed last year. It's packed with knowledge, but it has no idea what happened yesterday. It's a finished book. The goal here is to transform that book into a student that never ever stops learning. And yet, this static nature is a huge challenge in AI. I mean, how do you get these incredibly complex models to learn new things or pick up a totally new skill without having to do a massive, super expensive, and time-consuming retraining from the very beginning? Well, to tackle this, the researchers behind SEAL came up with a brilliant analogy. They looked at how we study. You know, when you're cramming for a big exam, you don't just passively read the textbook over and over again, hoping it sticks. No, you actively process it, right? You take the raw information from your lectures and books, and then you rewrite it, you summarize it, you make connections, you create your own study notes. That act of restructuring the information is how we really learn. So the big question becomes, what if an AI could do that for itself? And that, right there, is the core idea behind self-adaptation. It's about teaching the model how to learn from new data, not just passively swallowing it whole. It's a huge shift from being a static database to becoming a dynamic, active learner. Okay, so this leads us to a really key concept they call a self-edit. You can think of it as the AI generating its own personalized study guide. These are its study notes, a custom-made set of instructions and data that the model creates for itself to teach itself a new fact or a new skill. And all of this is wrapped up in the framework from the paper, which they call SEAL. It's basically a clever system designed to make this whole self-editing thing happen automatically. So here's how it works. SEAL has this really neat two-loop system. The inner loop is kind of like our student trying out a new set of study notes. The model generates a self-edit, those synthetic notes, and uses it to temporarily tweak its own internal wiring. It's basically asking, what happens if I try to learn it this way? Then comes the outer loop. This is where the system basically checks its own work. It gets a reward if that self-edit actually led to a better score on the exam. And through this trial and error process, it's a technique called reinforcement learning. The model literally gets better and better at creating effective study notes for itself over time. Okay, the theory sounds amazing, right? But the big question is, does this thing actually work in practice? Well, the researchers put SEAL through two very different and very tough tests to find out. First up was a knowledge test. The challenge was pretty straightforward. Could the model read a new piece of text, create a self-edit to learn the facts inside it, and then correctly answer questions about it later just from its own updated memory? And the results, well, they really speak for themselves. Just training on the raw text barely did anything. Using study notes generated by a much bigger model, GPT 4.1, helped a lot, boosting accuracy to 46.3%. But SEAL, by learning to generate its own best notes, actually beat it, just squeaking by at 47.0%. But the second test was honestly way harder: abstract reasoning. They used these tricky puzzles from a benchmark called ARC. And here, SEAL had to look at just a few examples of a brand new puzzle and then figure out the best way to train itself to solve it. It had to choose its own learning strategies. And this is where the power of learning how to learn really shines. On this incredibly difficult task, SEAL achieved a 72.5% success rate. Now, that number might not mean much on its own until you see what it's being compared to. Check this out. This is what's so wild. Standard in-context learning, just showing the model some examples, solved exactly 0 of the tasks. Letting the model create its own notes, but without that reward loop, that only got it to 20%. That reinforcement learning piece, the part that teaches it how to self-edit, that was the absolute game changer. So this is obviously a huge step forward, but, it's not the end of the story. As the researchers themselves point out, there are still some pretty big challenges on the road ahead.
Yeah, this process isn't perfect just yet. There are still hurdles to clear, like something called catastrophic forgetting, which is basically when learning a new thing causes the model to accidentally overwrite an old one. And that trial and error reward loop is, as you can imagine, computationally very expensive.
But the potential here is just enormous, especially when you think about this big problem looming over the entire field of AI, something called the data wall. A lot of experts think we're getting close to running out of high-quality human text on the internet to train these ever larger models.
So, what that means is the next big leap in AI might not come from just finding more data to shovel in. It might come from an AI's ability to create its own useful training data. In other words, its ability to become its own teacher. And this opens the door to something truly transformative, truly agentic systems. We're talking about models that can actively go out and interact with the world, learn directly from those interactions by updating their own brains, and just continuously get better and better over time, all without us having to constantly supervise them. So, this really brings us to a fundamental shift. We're moving from a world where we teach AI to a world where AI teaches itself. And that leaves us with a final, pretty wild thought. What happens when an AI can not only answer our questions, but can also figure out, all on its own, how to get better at learning?